Hey guys, this is part one of a two-part episode. In this one, I'll be looking at the updated Western Conference standings and sounding the alarm a little bit on where the Warriors could find themselves within the space of the next month. Plus the Golden State rotation. We saw Steve Kerr go to 13 players on Saturday against the Phoenix Suns. Surely that cannot continue. So which players could find themselves under pressure to retain their minutes? Plus a look ahead to Tuesday's NBA Cup game against Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Be on the lookout at 7 p.m. Pacific time. I'll release part two of the episode, purely looking at the latest trade intel from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype. Other than that, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. And let's get into it. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a good start to your week. Now, the Golden State Warriors on a 4-game losing streak currently. And there's a couple of different ways you could look at this. If you wanted to take the glass half full approach, you could look at the 4 games and think, okay, against the Spurs and the Nets, they led by 17 and 18 points respectively. They just should have won those games. And they played reasonably well early in the game to get those leads, and then their fourth quarter, late third quarter, fourth quarters were just absolutely disastrous. The game against the Thunder last week had an opportunity, right? They were up 3 with 5 or 6 minutes left. Kyle Anderson has that and-one that he misses the free throw, and then the Warrior offense just goes completely stagnant. If their offense was just any kind of half competent in that scenario, they win the game. They went 9 straight possessions without a bucket. Playing without Steph Curry, obviously, that's a clear factor. But, again, that real big opportunity to win that game. And then Saturday against the Phoenix Suns, probably the one game where I'd say they were thoroughly outplayed throughout it. However, they still found themselves in a position where they were a chance. I think they were down 7 with 8 minutes left. Steph comes back into the ball game. You think, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here for them, but the Suns go quickly on a 10-0 run, and that's about it. But even still, again, they had their opportunity in that game. So you could easily look at this 4-game stretch and think, you know what, they should have been probably at least 2-2, could have been 3-1, and really had opportunities in all 4 games. So maybe we should look at that and think, hey, it's not a complete disaster. People saying that the Warriors suck and they've reverted back to what they were always going to be entering into the season. I'll leave that up to you, but I think there's enough optimism here, even from the last 4 games, to suggest that the Warriors are still going to be capable of beating a lot of teams in the NBA. They're still 12-7. They're still in a reasonable spot. However, I look at the Western Conference standings, and it is very clear, plain and simple, that you cannot afford in this conference to go on extended losing streaks of 3-4 plus games. The Warriors 10 days ago, 12-3 after 15 games, sitting pretty atop the Western Conference. And since then, they've slipped to 4th. And now, if you look at it, they're not just under pressure to retain a top 6 spot and stay out of the play-in tournament, but they're under pressure to retain a top 8 spot. They're under pressure to retain a top 10 spot in the standings. That's how competitive, how brutal this is, that if you go on any kind of losing streak, this is what can happen. And that's why it's so important starting against the Nuggets on Tuesday. It's so important for the Warriors to nip this losing streak in the bud rather quickly, rather than letting it get out to 5, 6, 7 games. Because this is the period in the Western Conference, this is a period where if you do lose 6 or 7 games in a row, you look back at it at the end of the season and you're like, that's where our playoff hopes were dashed. That's the period. That's the 2-week period right there where our hopes were ruined. And that's what the Western Conference brings, is that you just have to be off for a couple of weeks. And I think it's really important, when the momentum is going against you, when things are down and out a little bit, you can't let that be cataclysmic, right? And be an absolute complete disaster to the point where your season is now in ruins. And that's what the Warriors have to be very, very careful. They got off to a 12-3 start. They're not fortunate. They played very well during that stretch. But they were fortunate in that gives them the affordability to lose a few games here. So they've lost 4 in a row, but they're still okay. Right now, as I'm speaking, they're still okay. However, you lose tomorrow against the Nuggets. You lose a couple more games here. The schedule in December is horrifically tough. Like really, really tough. The Warriors could easily find themselves 8th to 10th, maybe even worse by the end of the calendar year, by the end of December. If you look at the standings right now, so the Warriors are now 2.5 games back from the OKC Thunder. They're 2 games back from the Rockets. They're equal, basically, with the Grizzlies and the Mavs, essentially. There's that kind of 3-way tie there almost for the spot in the standings. Then they're half a game up on the Lakers and the Clippers. They're 1 game up on the Suns. And they're 1.5 up on the Nuggets and the Spurs, who are currently 9th and 10th in the standings. 1.5 games up on the 10th seed. This is how quickly things can turn around. So the Warriors have to do something here rather quickly to make sure that it doesn't become a complete disaster. In terms of the rotation, obviously a huge talking point after Saturday's game against the Suns, where Steve went to 13 players essentially in the first 14 minutes, which, I mean, most people, including myself, thought that a 12-man rotation was reasonably unsustainable when Steve was going to that at the start of the season. And so to be going to 13, it's not going to work. Right? That's a one-off. I don't think anyone wants to see that again. Do we want to even see a 12-man rotation? I don't think so. Do we want to see 11? I don't think so. Like, when you've got DeAnthony Melton now out for the season, that's obviously one guy who would have been in your rotation that is no longer there. I think you could go to 10. So that means of the 13 that played on Saturday, that's 3 players that have got to go out and be like, okay, well, you're just not playing anymore for the foreseeable future, unless there's another player that, obviously there'll be injuries happen. The form issue, might see another player come into the mix. But Steve, I think, needs to settle on something here. Ideally, it settles on a starting lineup and also settles on, I think, a 10-man rotation. So what does that mean for some of these players? A few that could be on the chopping block facing the axe as such when it comes to rotation minutes. If you look at the game against the Suns on Saturday, you had 6 players play 15 minutes or less. It was like TJD, GP2, Kyle Anderson, Lindy Waters, Moses Moody, Pat Spencer. So you look at that and think, well, those 6 players are the ones that are probably most under threat here when it comes to rotation minutes. Everyone else will park you to one side. You're in the rotation for the moment. But those 6 guys, they're probably under the most pressure. I think TJD is going to be the starting center for the foreseeable future. I think you just got to keep rolling him out there. You could certainly do with a massive upgrade to that position, and we'll get into that on part 2 of this episode when we get into the trade stuff. But you could certainly do with an upgrade there, but until you get that, I think you've just got to continue rolling him out, playing him 15, 18 minutes, depending on the matchup, obviously, depending on how he's playing. It's been a pretty disappointing year 2 for Trace Jackson-Davis, but at the end of the day, there's still only him and Loon as genuine center options on the roster, and as a result, those 2 guys, I think, will continue playing, particularly given they obviously want a big next to Draymond in the starting lineup. So I don't think TJD is necessarily under threat, even though he played less than 15 minutes on Saturday, and then he played less than 4 minutes against the Thunder last week as well. In terms of the other guys, Kyle Anderson, I don't think he's going to start getting DNPs. Like, I just don't see that. In fact, most people would argue it should go the other way and he should be playing more, like playing just over 7 minutes on Saturday against the Suns. Most people would say, how is that possible? He should be playing 15, 18. He's currently averaging a career low in minutes, I think, since his rookie year. So he's probably not having the impact that we would like. The issue with all these guys, like when we're talking about Slow-Mo, TJD, GP2, a lot of these guys, like, there's so many non-shooters on the Warrior roster that I think you've just got to limit how many non-shooters you have on the floor at any one time. Like, you're talking about those guys, Kuminga, Draymond, Loon. Like, there's just so many guys who are just non-shooting threats, non-scoring threats even to a degree, some of them. Just makes it really difficult to play these guys for extended minutes because it's hard to have, like, 3 non-shooters, 3 non-scorers in a lineup in combinations together. It makes it really difficult. And so that's why I think Kyle Anderson has been shuttled back a little bit here, where he's only playing, anywhere between 7 and 15 minutes. It's because it's hard when teams aren't going to guard you from three. It's hard to put too many of these guys on the floor at any one time. But I don't think he's going to be getting DNPs anytime soon. Let's put it that way. The four that I think could get DNPs and could be facing the axe here in the Warrior rotation. Let's start with Moses Moody. I was having this conversation with a mate yesterday, and he was gobsmacked. He was genuinely gobsmacked because he didn't actually watch the game on Saturday. I said, do you know how many minutes Moses played on Saturday? He's like, 7, 8. he knows that Steve hates. I don't think Steve hates Moses, but that's just how I'm going to roll with it. He knows that Steve has something against Moses in terms of rotation minutes. But he said, 7, 8. And he would have been disappointed with that. And I said, 2 minutes and 46 seconds. And his eyes were like, what is going on? Like, you see a guy who's basically shooting 40% from three. He's a 6'6" wing. He's got some size. I'm not saying he's an elite defender, but it's the same conversation with Moses. It's like, you have to think, you look at this guy, and he looks like a guy that should be playing a lot more. He should be playing 20-plus minutes. He could be. I still look at, if you're trying to replace DeAnthony Melton in the starting lineup, the closest thing you could get to that in terms of like 3-and-D is Moses Moody. Now, Moses doesn't have the ball handling, the playmaking chops that Melton did. But in terms of just like being able to stick a three on one end, being able to play a bit of defense on the other, I think Moses Moody's the best option that the Warriors had. And that's why I continue to say I was surprised he didn't take that role up when Melton got injured. And it's actually, like, you would have thought he would have been one of the players to benefit the most from that injury, and yet his minutes are still going backwards. So he has to be in the mix to get a DNP here soon. He has to be, based on what we've seen in recent games, the fact he had 15 first half points against the Nets and then saw 4 minutes in the second half, played less than 3 minutes total once that day against the Suns. Now, those 2 minutes, 46 seconds were awful. No one's arguing that. But still, young player, room for growth. Looks like he has the tools. I don't know. I don't know what is going to happen here. I don't know what is going on. And we're just going to have to wait and see. I still think I'd be heavily surprised if Moses Moody gets a DNP. We're also looking at this now as part of, hey, you just signed him to a 3-year, $39 million extension. Like, surely you see a spot for this guy moving forward. It's got to happen now, doesn't it? It has to. We can't be waiting too much longer. I don't know. It's really disappointing, but it is what it is. It's been the case for Moses throughout his entire career so far. The three players that I think should exit the rotation. Gary Payton II is clearly the most controversial one. Again, it comes down to the fact you just can't have non-shooters. Gary Payton II is shooting 17.6% from three this season. I just don't know how you can have a guy out there who, yes, he brings elite defense, but 17.6%. I know Pods is only shooting a little bit better than that, but Pods kind of brings a lot of other things to the table. I think he's a connective piece. He does, he can handle the ball on offense. He can pass, play make on offense. So he does more offensive things than GP2. He's really just dunker spot or corner threes. And if he's not hitting those corner threes, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard for him to be a viable rotation player. And I came into this season thinking, I think that he's just a situational player where if an opposing guard gets off the leash, you throw him out there. And that's what I'm kind of getting back to. Early season stuff was pretty good, pretty impactful, but the shooting is just too much to overcome, I think. And I look at it and think, yeah, you should just be a situational player where some nights you get DNPs, others, yes, there actually is an opposing guard going off and we need you a little bit to try and hassle and harass those guys. But I don't think he should be a guaranteed 10, 15 minutes a night anymore. And it's really good. It's fantastic that he's been out there playing. He's played all 19 games. He seems to, touch wood, have got over the injury issues that he had gone through over the past 2 years. But the shooting, again, it's too much to overcome for a guy who is very limited offensively, right? It's dunker spot or it's corner threes. And if he's not hitting those corner threes at at least, it's got to be like 35%. He's shooting half that. It's not good. The other two, I think, are more obvious. GP2, you can certainly make an argument for him to remain in the rotation. The other two, Lindy Waters, you're a specialist three-point shooter, and over the last 15 games, which is the majority of the season, 15 out of 19 games, it was good for the first four. The last 15, he's shooting 31.1% from three-point range. You're a specialist shooter. That's what you're on the team for. That's what you do. That's your elite skill, and you're shooting 31.1% from three. Now, if it continues to be in the rotation, you'd expect that to rise and for there to be a bit of an uptick there. But I just don't think he brings enough else as opposed to a guy like I still see more upside in Moody to be playing him. And I know it's the obvious conversation we've been having over the last week here or so that why is Lindy Waters playing 12, 13 minutes more a game than Moses Moody? It doesn't make any sense. We've seen Waters now go out of the starting lineup. I'm surprised he actually played on Saturday against the Suns. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's completely out of the rotation come the Nuggets matchup tomorrow. So, again, you're shooting 31.1% from three. It's hard to play you when that's really the only thing you're bringing to the table. The other one is Pat Spencer. Cool, it was fun. I got it for the backup point guard minutes on Wednesday with Steph out. To see him getting like fourth quarter minutes on Saturday against the Suns, let's be serious. Can we just be serious, and try and win that game? I'm sorry. I actually don't mind some of the stuff he does. I think he's solid. But I just don't see the upside there to suggest that, hey, this guy is going to be a top 10 rotation player for you on a playoff team. And when you've got Steph and Pods available, if you're having to go to Pat Spencer, then I think that's a surefire sign that you probably shouldn't look at trying to get another backup point guard on the trade market or doing something. What's stopping the Warriors from waiving Guy Santos and signing Markelle Fultz? What's stopping them from doing that? Guy's in the G League currently. Do we have high hopes for his future? He's got tools. I'm not exactly sure if that develops into anything. But if you really if you think your backup point guard spot is in a bit of trouble, which I think it is if you're playing Pat Spencer, genuine early fourth quarter minutes in Phoenix, then figure it out. Get someone else. Markelle Fultz is available. I'm not saying he would be great, but he'd be an upgrade at that spot, you'd imagine. I don't get how Markelle Fultz is out of the league. I thought he was pretty good for the Magic the last two seasons. I don't get it. But again, maybe that's something I'm getting into on part two when we talk trade, and then in the case of Markelle Fultz, free agency as well. So those three guys to me, GP2, Waters, Spencer, you just eliminate them from the rotation. You got 10 guys. Those three guys played, I think, around 30, 35 minutes on Saturday against the Suns. That allows you to open up 30, 35 minutes, as I said, to give to guys like Moody, Kuminga, Kyle Anderson, these type of guys. And I think it's so difficult for when you've got six guys playing under 15 minutes. It's really tough for those guys to find a rhythm. Steph said that after the game. It's we probably might need to shorten the rotation because it's really hard to find a rhythm, not just for those guys that are playing less than 15 minutes, but the guys that are also playing with them and playing with so many different guys. It's tough. Steph admitted that himself. And so it's time to make changes if you're Steve Kerr. And I think 13 down to 10. Maybe GP2 can play a little bit and it can be 13 down to 11 at the very least. But we'll wait and see on that one. Warriors play the Nuggets tomorrow, final NBA Cup game. I could care less about the NBA Cup. Warriors are already through to the quarterfinals. Let's just break this losing streak. I do not care about the NBA Cup right now. Quarterfinal, I might care. But this last game, group game, don't care. End the losing streak. It's going to be very difficult, though. The Warriors' history with the Nuggets here over the past few years is deplorable. Clearly the worst opponent for the Warriors over the past 3 years. The Nuggets have won the Nuggets have won all 7 of their previous meetings and have won 11 of the last 12 during the regular season. Right, so the 7 have come after the Warriors beat the Nuggets in the first round of the 2022 playoffs. And then even in that season, the Nuggets won 3 or 4 matchups, and that's where the 11 of the 12 comes from. The Warriors have not won a regular season game in Denver since March 2020. We're talking nearly 5 years ago. This was the team the Warriors rolled out when they won 116-100 over the Nuggets in March 2020. Starting lineup, Michael Mulder. I'm just going through this because I think it's a little fun exercise, a little trip down memory lane. Michael Mulder, Damian Lee, Andrew Wiggins, who'd recently just been traded to the franchise, Juan Toscano Anderson, and Marquise Chris. That's a starting five. Off the bench, you had Eric Pascal playing 35 minutes, Jordan Poole, Dragan Bender, and Chasson Randall. We have one guy still on the team from that. And I think Draymond and Loon were both out injured. They were there and around the scenes. And obviously, Steph out injured at that point, and Clay obviously out injured at that point. Wiggins still around. Everyone else, how many guys are even in the league there? Damian Lee still on Phoenix, not really playing. Poole, obviously, and that's it. I love reminiscing sometimes about that team because there were guys on that team I thought these guys could actually be pieces moving forward. Marquise Chris was good for the Warriors for a bit. Thought, that could be a long-term piece. I always remember the stint of Dragan Bender. I think he only played 10 games for us. But obviously a heap of injuries brought him in, former 4th overall pick from Phoenix. I was irrationally optimistic on Dragan Bender. I don't know. He had, you look at that game against the Nuggets, he had 14, 5, and 2 and went 2 of 4 from 3. He was like this 7-footer who could shoot threes. He'd be nice on the Warriors right now if he actually had developed into anything, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. I think he's back playing in Europe. Anyway, it goes to show you, the Warriors have not won a game in Denver for a long time. The roster is completely different since then, obviously, and the Nuggets have simply had the wood over the Warriors over these past couple of seasons, particularly and especially in the regular season, going back to at least 3 years with 11 of the past 12 here. The one question that I look at here and think to myself, how in God's earth are we going to stop Nikola Jokic? It's just, no one can stop him, but the Warriors are just not built to stop him whatsoever with the individual matchups that they can throw at him in terms of TJD and Loon, because those guys aren't going to. Maybe TJD can a little bit if you get him involved in some pick and roll stuff, but those guys just can't hurt the Joker too much on the other end of the floor, because that's where you kind of look at Jokic and you think, okay, well, if we can get him to work as much as possible on the defensive end, maybe tire him out some, that's where we could possibly get an advantage. But otherwise, it's just impossible. The numbers this guy is putting up this season is just stupid. They are stupid. He's 29.6 points a game, 13.2 rebounds, 10.7 assists. He's 50.8% from 3. 50.8% from 3 on 4.3 attempts per game. That's like an attempt and a half more than he's generally averaged over the last couple of years. I think he was 2.9 last season. He's up that to 4.3. He's taken the PISS. He's taken the piss. Look at the on-off numbers. And this is where the Warriors have to take advantage, to me, because they're probably going to lose the Jokic minutes. It's just, that's what happens. He's plus 11.6 when he's on the floor, and the team is minus 14.3 when he's off. So that's a plus 25.9 on-off rating. There is no player in the league that is more, and this is the case for Jokic winning a 4th MVP, is aside from the stupid numbers that he's putting up that I just laid out there, but there's no player that's more impactful to their team. When he's on the floor, they're great, and when he's off the floor, they stink. Their bench sucks, right? Really sucks. And so when I look at this game and where the Warriors can win it, that has got to be when Jokic is off the floor. I don't know how many minutes he's going to be off the floor because it is an NBA Cup game. When he is off the floor, the Warriors have to take full advantage. And this has been one of the areas of weakness, one of the biggest issues for the Warriors over the past 4 games, is that their bench has gone from a major strength to a huge issue where throughout the first 15 games, they're 12-3, The bench is leading a lot of that. They've got the third best bench in the league, plus 5.2 net rating, only behind the Cavaliers and the Thunder, two of the other best teams in the league. The last 4 games, the Warrior bench, 29th in net rating, minus 9.4, only better than the Indiana Pacers. Okay, that's a drastic difference. Third in bench rating, and they're quickly going to 29th. Now, where do they sit overall? I still think optimistically that they can get back to being a top 10 bench in the league. But there's some serious issues here. Like, obviously, a lot of the guys individually have just fallen off. Like, Buddy Hield's fallen off. Kuminga hasn't been great, and he missed a couple of games as well. Moses and Lindy Waters, their shooting has fallen off, although Waters was in a starting role for a while there. Pods, before he went into the starting lineup, wasn't shooting well. That's the thing. Like, the bench over these last 4 games, they're 43.6% from the floor, 33.9% from three-point range. There's just not enough. I wouldn't even say it's the shooting. I would say it's the creation. I just think, like, you look at the shot diet of a Buddy Hield, and a lot of these shots he's taking are really, really difficult, particularly in half court. Buddy Hield's best when he's kind of leaking out in transition. If the Warriors get a stop defensively, he can leak out, and then he can get an open look, either running to the basket for a layup or, more notably, getting a wide open look from 3 within really the first 5 to 8 seconds of the offense. That's when he's going to get his open looks. If you get down into a half-court set with that bench unit, there's just not enough guys who can penetrate, get in the paint, make the defense collapse, kick out, and have Buddy Hield wide open. Because Buddy Hield, he's getting these tough looks because he's playing with so many non-shooters. The defenses just aren't guarding those guys. Makes it a lot easier for opposing defenses. I don't know. Can the bench turn it around? I hope so. There's still Buddy Hield. There's still Kuminga. They're still deep. So they need to be far better, obviously, than 29th in bench net rating. And the Nuggets, their bench stinks. So this should be an opportunity for the Warriors to try and turn things around. And that's probably going to be their best chance of winning this game. Honestly, you look at the Warriors' recent form, losing 4 straight. You look at their past form and how they match up with the Nuggets and the fact they've lost 7 straight, 11 of the past 12. I'm not confident. I'll be brutally honest. I'm not confident of them winning this game. But we will wait and see. I'm going to finish it up there. Thank you very much for those of you that tuned in. Be on the lookout for part 2 coming in a few hours' time here. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, that would be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you on part 2, hopefully.